The top of his desk was clear. He had dusted and wiped it down, leaving the lingering scent of disinfectant in the air. He stared at the blank canvas before him, imprinting that open space inside his mind. It was a plane in 2 dimensions, an x-axis and a y-axis. The invisible point at its center was 0, dividing his plane into 4 quadrants. But all he cared about was the x-axis. He focused on the invisible horizontal line slicing across his desk. The line was a single dimension. 1 dimension. He closed his eyes and saw the world in 4. Transcribing his mind into a palpable diagram always proved difficult. First, he let the bare fingers of both hands drag across the desk, the feel of clean, finished wood along his fingertips providing him with tangible vectors. He lifted his fingers and placed them in the center point of the desk. 4 fingers, 2 on each hand, pressed tightly against each other on the invisible 0 of his line. He murmured the current date. Then he slowly dragged his fingers apart, 2 fingers to the left and 2 fingers to the right. His mind finally began to align itself to the single dimension he forced upon it. He paused to pull his wallet from his jacket and unzip the change pocket. A number of small cards, carefully cut to a uniform size from larger index cards, were tucked inside. He let the cards spill onto the desk, causing chaos on his open space. He flipped all the cards upward. The neat handwriting on the cards indicated places, names, or events. The color of the ink or graphite varied from card to card, reflecting the changing writing utensils he had used as he transcribed his notes whenever necessary. He spread the cards out before him so he could see them all at once, in no order. He closed his eyes. Carefully, he pressed his fingers against one card and dragged it to its place along the line. Then he did another. For several minutes he arranged his cards along the x-axis, some bunched so tightly that he had to stack them on top of each other. Left of 0 was fairly simple. Right of 0 was far more difficult. Once he had his cards laid out, he paused. 1 remained. He lifted the final card. He had written out a single name on it, 4 kanji double-checked against the school registry. Kadoyuki Yoshimoto. He placed the card on 0. It was auspicious, that name. The first time he had read it, he wondered if it were some cosmic joke. The kanji for Kato was the kanji for gateway. And that was exactly what Kadoyuki would be.
Ayase Watanabe frowned. Sitting on the edge of her bed, one knee-high sock pulled up her calf and the other still bunched up in her hand, she twisted her free arm to flick the tiny switch on her bedside alarm clock. The pop music vanished. Relief flooded through her. They're playing that one on every channel now, she thought in defeat, although it was too early for her to feel anything stronger than slight negativity. As she pushed her toes into the remaining sock, she reminded herself for the millionth time to get a CD alarm clock so that she wouldn't be at the mercy of the radio. The sock had a hole in it. It wasn't obvious until the faint peach of her big toe winked out from the white fabric. It caught her attention for a moment, but she knew her school slippers would hide it. She pushed herself from the bed and stepped toward the full-length mirror. Her reflection stared back at her, donned in government-issued black, white, and gray. She tied the ribbon hanging from her collar into a bow that matched the enclosed picture. She swayed her hips a bit, watching the hem of her skirt dance back and forth over her knees. She cleared her throat, took a breath, and bowed as low as she could. That's not too bad. The skirt still covered enough of her legs, even when she bent in half. She straightened and reached above her head, her fingers outstretched towards the ceiling. The hem of her blouse shifted upward, but not far enough that it exposed any skin. She dropped her arms, satisfied. Ayase was prepared. She knew high school would be more difficult than junior high, and she wasn't taking any chances. She liked that her uniform was a little loose, giving her free range of motion without risk of flashing an audience. She had money, her keys, and a list of emergency phone numbers in her pocket. Her mind was clear and focused, ready to dutifully interact with her classmates before politely blowing them off. She would be fine. She looked like a normal student, average in every way, a girl who would blend into a school crowd and disappear. It was the best she could hope for. She reached for her comb to brush her bangs into her eyes.
There was shaking and a voice.
Hello? Hello?
Joe Oda snorted in his sleep. He refused to wake up yet. He'd had one of those good dreams.
Oda-san.
Money and women. That was it right there. A bank heist, a femme fatale in black leather in the getaway passenger seat, partying in Tijuana. It was like that American movie he'd seen the other day.
Oda-san, hey.
Joe frowned and hugged his pillow tighter. Just like that movie. He'd like the end of that one.
Oda-san, it's 6:45.
Shaking again.
Oda-san.
Go away, Joe croaked into his pillowcase. I don't know who you are, but I'll break your arm if you keep doing that. The hand on his shoulder lifted. Footsteps creaked across the room.
I'm your roommate. School starts in 20 minutes.
Joe heard the sound of a drawer opening, the slight scraping of a comb through hair.
I thought you'd want to know.
Joe snorted and buried back in his pillow. It was gone, though. The bags of stolen loot and the girl in leather solidified into movie shots in the back of his mind. Some hairy-chested action star replaced him in the front seat of the car. Damn. Joe lazily lifted his eyelids. 650, the green-lit alarm numbers pointed out. 650. 650. 651.
Hey.
A teenager who looked vaguely familiar squatted beside the bed. He brushed two long, too thick bangs from his forehead to behind his ear, though they broke free and fell right back to where they'd been.
You okay? You want a canned coffee or something?
Joe closed his eyes. I'll get one later. Joe heard the creak in the floorboards as his roommate stood again.
I'm going. See you.
Joe made an unintelligible gurgling noise. He opened his eyes to see his roommate kneeling by the doorframe. The boy stood up, a crumbled snack bag of Joe's in his hand, and threw the trash into a wastebasket across the room. He left and closed the door behind him. Joe moaned. God damn it, he snarled as he jammed a hand under his pillow. He pulled out with a cigarette box, shook it. His lips closed over the end of a stick and pulled it free of its confines. Screw school at 7 a.m., was all Joe could think as he flicked his lighter at the end of his cigarette. When the fire caught, he dragged deep, closed his eyes, and let the warm smoke trail out from the creases of his mouth and widened nostrils. His insides calmed, if only slightly. I'm running low. One eyelid lifted as its eyeball rolled to the bedside table. Joe's wallet, resting open, seemed painfully thin. He'd partied pretty late with those girls the night before. His fingers flicked deftly through the remaining bills. He sighed. Taking a long drag before pulling the cigar out from his mouth, he balanced the lit stick between his fingers as he opened the table's drawer and rummaged through. Within moments, he pulled free with another wallet. He flipped it open. The idea of a college boy stared back at him. He checked the bill sheath and found some loose cash and a few credit cards. After scratching the money up into his grip, he squinted at the identification. The boy didn't look enough like Joe for him to swap it with his current fake ID. He closed the wallet and crammed it under his mattress for later disposal. He finished his cigarette as he slowly pushed his legs over the bedside. He murmured as he ground the stick into his ashtray. I guess school's still good for one thing. He stretched his arms over his head and took a deep breath. The cricks in his neck popped one by one. Suckers.
Tokyo Demons.
Book 1. You're Never Alone.
Written by Lianne Sentar.
Illustrations by Priscilla Hamby.
Editorial music and audiobook by Rebecca Scoble.